Tanse, I'm Chris Nashkate. Welcome to APTN National News Daytime. Last Thursday, the Canadian Armed Forces formally apologized to members of all minorities who have experienced racism and harassment while serving in the forces. Many Indigenous veterans were invited to the semi-private ceremony in Ottawa. APTN's Fraser Needham has that story.
At a ceremony in Ottawa, there was a tearful General Jenny Carignan, Chief of Defence Staff, who apologized to all those who have experienced racism while serving their country.
I apologize to every CAF member, veteran who experienced racism, discrimination, and harassment. And I acknowledge we failed you.
Sentiments were echoed by Chief Warrant Officer Bob McCann, who oversees all non-commissioned members of the forces.
You have endured terrible injustice that should have never happened. You were let down, suffered racist act of both omission and commission, flowing from a systemic racism that was able to flourish because your leadership did not do enough to confront it, to condemn it, or to put an end to it.
Historically, Indigenous people had no problems enlisting in Canada's armed forces, especially during global conflicts like World Wars I and II, Korea and Afghanistan. At the same time, they were denied benefits given to other veterans, post-secondary education, housing, and land grants. Wendy Jocko is a former chief of Algonquins of Bikwaknagan near Ottawa. She served as a supply technician in the military from 1979 to 2002. She said old wounds run deep.
Some wore the uniforms while being denied the right to vote in the country they defended. Others returned home from overseas conflicts to find their children taken to residential schools. Many endured daily indignities, slurs whispered in mess halls, promotions denied, cultural practices forbidden, and identities erased.
Jocko added the apology is just a beginning.
We seek transformative, deep-lasting, and meaningful change that addresses the systems that have perpetuated harm. True reconciliation requires more than acknowledgement of past wrongs. It demands concrete action, representation at all levels of leadership, culturally safe spaces within military spaces.
Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
At a press conference in Ottawa last week, a Nunavut organization laid out its vision for what it would like to see as nation-building projects. Paul Inaut is the vice president of Nunavut Tungavik. He outlined the 4 projects he would like to see completed, which includes a road and port to boost resource development and link Nunavut to the rest of Canada, and a Iqaluit hydroelectric project to move the territory away from diesel power, the Kivalik hydroelectric project to provide electric and high-speed internet to the region, and a deep-sea port to serve as a strategic hub to the Arctic. Inaut said the defense of the Canadian Arctic and the future of Nunavut are linked to these projects.
This is what sovereignty looks like. It means affordable power bills, reliable broadband, and youth that can study and work where they grew up in Inuktitut. It means a Canada who can move, sustain, and defend itself in the Arctic. The cost of waiting is higher than the cost of building now.
Mi'kmaq communities in Cape Breton and the Antigonish area of Nova Scotia are mourning the death of a child after a 2-vehicle collision over the weekend. Meanwhile, RCMP are looking for one driver involved who allegedly left the scene. On Saturday, November 1st at around 9:50 p.m., RCMP responded to a 2-vehicle collision on Highway 104 near Dagger Woods Road and Pomquet Monk's Head Road. When RCMP arrived on scene, they determined the collision involved a black Toyota RAV4 and a large farm or construction vehicle. The 4 occupants of the Toyota were taken to hospital where a 7-year-old boy died of his injuries. The driver of the other vehicle did not remain on scene. RCMP later located the involved vehicle and seized it for investigation. RCMP is now asking anyone who was on Highway 104 Saturday night and may have seen the driver to call them or Crime Stoppers. York Factory First Nation in northern Manitoba declared a state of emergency in late July due to low water levels and the shutdown of their lifeline ferry service. It's been more than 105 days without this service now. APTN's Julia Ross has more.
Chief and Council are now calling on Manitoba Transport Minister Lisa Naylor to resume ferry service before Split Lake freezes over. Chief Daryl Wasestakut said in a media release the weather should be mild for the next few weeks, and if ferry service is restored in time, it would allow his community to bring in their school bus, garbage truck, supplies for the trade school, and lumber for housing. Wasestakut says on September 14th he called on Naylor and Environment Minister Mike Moyes to push Manitoba Hydro to release more water from the Kiosk Dam system to maintain ferry service. Chief Wasestakut says water levels on Split Lake have been rising again, hopefully because the ministers are responding to York Factory's calls. In a statement to APTN, Minister Naylor's staff says ferries require a minimum water level to safely operate without damaging the boat. Unfortunately, the likelihood that the ferry will be able to adequately and safely operate this season is very small. We will continue to work with the local community to find alternative options. Julia Ross, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Today marks Election Day in the Yukon, and voters are heading out to the polls to decide who will be the next leader of the territory. Issues like housing, healthcare, and the economy dominated all three of the territory's political parties' campaigns. There are 61 candidates running across 21 electoral districts. This year's election includes 2 new ridings in Whitehorse's Whistle Bend neighborhood. Our Sarah Connors will have the full story later on APTN National News. A man accused in connection to a Norval-Morrisseau art fraud ring was back in court recently. We'll have that story when we come back. Welcome back. The 49-year-old man accused of fraud in connection with the alleged Norval-Morrisseau art fraud ring was back in court in Barrie, Ontario. CTV's Mike Arcelides brings us the latest.
Jeff Cowan, who was representing himself, called Detective Inspector Adam Wilkins as a witness today. Cowan questioned him over Zoom, telling the court about what he saw and did when responsible for recording video and taking photos while Cowan's property was being searched by investigators. Cowan asked the officer about why he didn't record video inside Cowan's storage locker, where a filing cabinet was found. The officer testified there was nothing of interest inside the filing cabinet, so he didn't photograph it. Cowan asking the witness, "You personally didn't open it yourself?" "I'm sure it was searched, but I don't know who opened it. But I do know it was open," the officer testified. He said the same for storage bins found in the locker. The case centers on allegations Cowan was the source of purported mimicked works of late Indigenous artist Norval-Morrisseau. The Crown alleging Cowan is part of an art fraud ring that passed off fake Morrisseau paintings as authentic art that flooded the market and sold for tens of thousands of dollars. Cowan's co-accused Jim White and David Paul Bremner took plea deals this summer and were sentenced to house arrest after admitting to being involved in the selling of purported Morrisseau works. Bremner testified this week he was an expert in Morrisseau paintings, having studied them for years. He then appraised and authenticated works provided to him by White. The 84-year-old White testified for the Crown and told the court about provenance, vital documentation that traces the chain of custody of art from its creator to current owner. With provenance, works become more valuable than art without documentation. White testified Cowan told him he got Morrisseau pieces from his uncle, Dr. Howard Alexander. "If you don't have provenance, you're taking your chances," he told the court. White testified he never received provenance from Cowan. "Perhaps I never had provenance for any of the paintings," he told the jury. The trial is scheduled to continue next week, when it's expected Cowan will call further witnesses to the stand. Mike Arcelides, CTV News, Barrie.
A new $100 million economic development project is being planned in North Battleford, Saskatchewan. And as APTN video journalist Rachel May reports, the chief behind the project says it's a sure bet.
Chief Tanya Aguilera-Antiman of the Mosquito Grizzly Bears Head Lean Man First Nations has broken ground on the $100 million project to close down the Gold Eagle Casino and move it to a new 67-acre site just west of its current location in North Battleford. Chief Aguilera-Antiman says that it's the largest single investment ever undertaken by a First Nation in Saskatchewan.
As far as the potential development in that area is incredible. It's way beyond that number, but we want to send a strong message to everybody around the table that we are serious.
The First Nation bought the new site through its own holding company. They plan to build a hotel, a convention center, a cultural gathering place, and of course, a new casino. An investment for future generations, the chief says.
And that's what this is all about, is leaving that legacy, for that next generation, that they're not here yet. We need to be prepared. And as leaders, it's our responsibility to do our best for our nation.
The Gold Eagle Casino operates under the blanket of the Saskatchewan Indian Gaming Authority, SIGA, a nonprofit organization that sends half of its profits to the 74 First Nations in the province. SIGA operates 7 casinos and 1 online gaming site. Gold Eagle was the first. Owned by the Mosquito Grizzly Bears Head Lean Man First Nations, it opened in March of 1996. Aguilera-Antiman says SIGA has never really been good to the First Nations she's led.
Mosquito Grizzly Bear Head Lean Man, they were not treated fairly in this entire process. And with the current head lease, as far as rights holders, landholders, we only receive $252,000 a year. That is all we get from the casino.
The deal with SIGA ends on April 1st, 2027. The details of a new agreement still have to be worked out, but for now, plans to move and rebuild a new Gold Eagle are moving forward. Rachel May, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
As we showed you last week, the Winnipeg Comic-Con wrapped up on October 26th. One of the special guests this year was actor Diamond Phillips, best known for his lead role in La Bamba, who took pictures and visited with his fans, including David McLeod. McLeod showed him an episode of the hit comedy Acting Good, where 2 of the characters are talking about how Indigenous people view Diamond Phillips as one of us. Have a listen.
Gotta get to the airport and pick up entertainment for my mom's birthday party.
Oh yeah, we got the best Diamond Phillips impersonator in the biz.
Diamond Phillips? You got your mom a screwdriver?
Phillips the actor. And we hired an impersonator to perform his scenes from his movies for Agnes's birthday.
Yeah, and not only is Diamond an actor, but he's the gold standard for Indigenous-ish roles.
Played all the coolest Indigenous roles.
Yeah, not like today, where you wussies have real Indigenous actors.
Yeah, man. He was Chavez in Young Guns. He also played a deadly Anouk in Shadow of a Wolf. And he was Richie Valens on La Bamba.
Natives love him, even though he's just a itty-bitty tiny bit Cherokee.
Whatever he was, he had all of our hearts.
Yeah, white kids had Jesus up on their wall, but us? We had good old Lucky Lou.
Check it out.
There's our guy.
Man, he looks so cool on a horse.
What the?
Get to the airport and pick up entertainment for my mom's birthday party.
That is excellent. Ish. I'm a little ish. I'm native-ish. I like it. I just, I've been really, really fortunate to, represent so many communities, throughout the years, and wanting to get it right, making sure that I pay respect and that I bring honor and dignity, to the communities, that I've had the great fortune, to represent. So.
Saturday, when he was talking to the crowd, it was like half Filipino, half Indigenous crowd, and he was invited to some northern communities. Can you visit our community? Can you visit our community? And so I think that he has that kind of love. People, there was some people had portraits that they did of Diamond Phillips, asked them to sign portraits that they painted.
That's cool.
People had family. Leonard Sumner, of course, a well-known musician, was there with his daughter, wanted her to meet Lou Diamond Phillips. So it's really cute to see.
We now want to give you the results from last week's web poll questions. Pardon me. Our first question was, should federal inmates be paid minimum wage for the work they do? 54% voted yes, 38% voted no, and 8% were unsure. Our second question was, are governments doing enough to acknowledge historical injustices against Indigenous peoples? 26% said yes, 64% said no, and 10% were unsure. And our final question was, what are your thoughts regarding a floating natural gas facility and marine export terminal off the northwest coast of BC? 25% said I support it, 46% said I don't support it, and 29% were unsure. Thanks to everyone who took the time to cast your votes. You can go to our website at aptnnews.ca to see our next list of questions this week. Mohawk Assistant Professor Cody Grote is up next to talk about the Indigenous items set to return from the Vatican Museum this December. We'll be right back. Thanks for staying with us. St. John's 4, Charlottetown 16. Cartwright, sunny and 0. La Grande River, showers and 4. Saguenay 8 and rain. Quebec City, sunny and 5. Peterborough 8, Toronto 9. Sudbury 5 and rain. Thunder Bay partly cloudy and 8. Puckatawagan +1, Norway House +3. 6 in Gimli, Winnipeg 5. Swift Current 0, Yorkton 2. La Ronge 3, Stony Rapids 1. Grand Prairie 7, Fort McMurray 4. Lethbridge 11, Medicine Hat 10. Tofino showers and 10, Vancouver 10. Prince George 6, Smithers 2. -1 in Watson Lake, Mayo sunny and -4. Wati -9, Wrigley -5. -16 in Tuktoyaktuk, Inuvik -19. Baker Lake -5 in sunny Chesterfield, snow and 0. And Clyde River -7. Our next guest is Cody Grote, who is an assistant professor in the Department of History and the Indigenous Studies program at Western University in London, Ontario, and a member of the Six Nations of the Grand River. Grote will talk about the recent news from the Vatican and the next steps currently underway to repatriate a few dozen of important Indigenous items from the museum, with those items expected to be back in Canada by this December. The Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops and the Vatican are close to finalizing the agreement in what's being called a church-to-church handoff of the items. The items will then be sent to the Canadian Museum of History in Gatineau, Quebec later this year, where experts will determine where the items will go next. We spoke to Cody Grote earlier. Here's that interview. Cody, thank you so much for speaking with us. First off, I want to get your reaction to the process that is playing out here. As we said earlier, these items in the Vatican Museum are going to be returned in a church-to-church process between the Vatican and the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops. The CCCB says they are working closely with Indigenous peoples, but First Nations scholars are still seeing some red flags here. What do you make of all this?
I think it's fascinating that the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops has really clearly asserted, and the Vatican has clearly asserted, that this is going to be a church-to-church transfer. And the reason why is because they don't want to establish a precedent of the Vatican as a state repatriating these items directly to Indigenous nations. There's going to be that intermediary. Now, that's their approach. I think it can cause some red flags for First Nations who say, we're not engaging directly with the Vatican in this process. We have to go through this intermediary. So I think it's entirely justifiable to express concerns about the process being developed.
Definitely some good points there. Cody, can you also explain how and why the Vatican and Pope Pius XI acquired these items in the 1920s?
This was for a very specific exhibit that was focused on the successes of missionary endeavors as it was framed at the time. So this exhibit happened 100 years ago in 1925. A catalog was produced, which gives us a general sense of some of the items that were depicted or shown in this exhibit. And that's really our starting point, is this catalog. Now, the Vatican collections are extensive. They've been collecting for literally thousands of years. We know there's going to be more in the Vatican collections besides what was in this 1925 exhibit. And again, this is going to be the starting point, ideally, of a much longer process.
And what are some of the long-lasting impacts of not returning these items to their rightful owners? APTN National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Nepanak has said these are not artifacts but living and sacred pieces of our culture and ceremonies.
And I really stand by what the National Chief has said in that statement, because as many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities have asserted, these are not artifacts. We're not going to put them behind a glass case and artificially preserve them. We understand in a lot of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities that when we repatriate these cultural ancestors back to our communities, they might eventually have some wear and tear, they might decay. That's part of the natural life cycle for these ancestors. So by artificially putting them in a storage vault or in a display case and not recognizing their own sentience, then they're not allowed to have that really essential role in community and in the retention and continuity of culture. So returning them needs to be really looking at these items as community members themselves.
Aside from the Vatican sending these items home back to Canada here, what do you think they should do next to move forward on reconciliation?
Well, when we look at how this process is going to play out, we see that the Canadian Museum of History is going to still also play an intermediary role, where they're going to help identify the best descendant communities to return these items to. And we know that in Canada, repatriation efforts have also not been equitably advanced. We know that there's still some deep problems with cultural items being held in Canadian collections, with communities fighting to try to repatriate those. So ideally, this Vatican example is going to be a really notable, a very visible instance of repatriation. We can poke holes at some of the processes in a justifiable way and hopefully develop domestic policies and international policies that really bring repatriation to the forefront in a good way.
Cody Grote is an assistant professor in the Department of History and Indigenous Studies program with Western University in London, Ontario. Thank you for your time, Cody.
Thank you.
And that's your daytime newscast for this November 3rd. We're back again for your evening newscast. Please join us then. From all of us at APTN National News, hai miigwech masicho. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again next day.